Start sending us your video. I think we're on. Hey Derek, how's it going, man? So you could hear me from your phone, but not the PC. That's interesting. Um, so yeah, I'm not seeing myself on this preview screen here, but it says I'm live. So all right. Any luck? Oh, okay. I think we're finally here. We got. Thanks again, guys, for bailing or not bailing. Thanks for not bailing. Thanks for bearing with me going through these technical difficulties, uh, dealing with some software issues on the back end with this product we use called Evmux. It's been a pain, but it does look like I am finally live on the correct stream. So good to hear, Derek. But yeah, guys, for those joining in now, feel free to get any questions in as you come across them. And yeah, we got a nice Friday slate here, as we often do. I believe it's 13 games. There are a few weather situations to keep an eye on, so I'll cover those first. Again, on these massive slates, if you don't want to deal with the weather, I mean, you can kind of get away from it. You don't have to worry too much about forcing in these things. It's not like you're going to get a ton of leverage, but there are some decent spots where we got to deal with rain, mainly the Cleveland at KC game. So last time we heard from Roth, he's saying it should start dry, but he's not sure it finishes dry. This tells me if you want to use pitchers there, which I don't, I guess you can. They probably get their full start in. Maybe we lose an inning or two on the back end. So that's the risk you're running there. Personally, I don't think it's enough for me to get away from this spot. I actually like Cleveland and KC bets a little bit. We'll talk about them when we get to stacks. Pitt in Atlanta, some spotty storms, nothing to really worry about there. I play Atlanta bats. We'll talk about them in a moment as well. Then we have Colorado and Chicago. Yeah, I don't even know why he has this listed. He's showing no in-game delay, so probably a good thing as far as that's concerned. So yeah, guys, feel free again. Get any questions, comments, concerns, however you want to kind of break down this slate. I'm happy to do it for you. But yeah, I got the MLB plug pulled up here. Looking at the top three arms we have today in the model, and then we'll talk through some of the bats and stacks. But for such a big slate, I will say it's really not the best slate for pitching. If you are using the model, make sure you have DK or FanDuel main selected. There's a few pitchers that didn't make the main slate, obviously, because we're playing games a little bit earlier than 7 Eastern. But top of the bottom, we have two pitchers in the same contest. Excuse me. So Bailey Ober's been really solid over his last few starts. This Mariners team, they have been playing good baseball, but it's not because of the bats. Their rotation has been excellent. Really just striking out as much as pretty much any team in baseball. So Ober upside here, obvious. I mean, we're looking at the K per IP. Over here on the right, we're seeing 1.25. I think that's the best on the slate today. Yes, it is. So yeah, really not shocked to see Ober up there. And while he's probably a little bit riskier than Logan Gilbert, who's pitching opposite him, um, I mean, I think the upside's even higher because the Mariners do strike out a lot. Their offense is actually worse than Minnesota's. Saying that, even knowing that Seattle's the better overall team. So yeah, just pulling up some of the stuff here that we have written up. I mean, Gilbert 3.47x inducing a ton of ground balls. So again, while he doesn't really have the K upside of Ober, he does a good job limiting damage. Definitely raises his floor if you're playing cash games or low risk contests. I think he makes a lot of sense there. Near 25% K rate, which isn't great, but I am reassured by the 15 plus percent swinging strike rate. Usually, when you're looking at 15 ish, it's going to push that number for his overall K rate up closer to 30%. So I do think we see some positive regression in terms of strikeouts for Gilbert. This lineup for Minnesota definitely does provide some of that upside. But yeah, I mean, I still like him a lot here. Again, I don't think his ceiling is as high as Bailey Ober, but I do think he has the higher floor. Then in the same game, we got Over. He's been excellent over his last few starts, but he's had rough patches at times throughout his career. Definitely less consistent than a Logan Gilbert, but at the same time, this Mariners offense has been terrible, striking out 30% of the time, plus 316 WOB against righties just isn't all that great. So yeah, I really do like Ober here. Really do like Gilbert. But then when we jump over to the ownership, we're going to see that they're the two most popular arms on DraftKings. And Drew Thorpe is the most popular arm on FanDuel today, which I find pretty damn interesting. But Gilbert and Ober are top four. The third arm we have listed today is Morton. Pittsburgh's offense is a little bit underrated, in my opinion. Morton's been more of an inconsistent arm, kind of like an Ober, more than a Gilbert over the course of this season, maybe the end of last as well. But again, for such a big slate, there's not a ton of arms I feel comfortable with. I don't know how many arms we can necessarily trust here. So, yeah, I don't know. I'm pretty happy with what we're dealing with in terms of these top three. I don't know that I want to stray too far away today, but like I always do, I'm going to sort by OF index, and I'll let you guys kind of know where I'm cutting things off. Playing 20 to 40 lineups today. I got 25 reserved on FanDuel. Going to try to build some on DK. But like I said, I think it's really easy to get different with bats. I don't feel good about some of the secondary pitching options. Ronel Blanco's one. His K rate has climbed a little bit. The Mets have been hitting the ball better ever since Grimace threw out that first pitch. But at the same time, it's still not a matchup I'm afraid of. I like Blanco. I'm mixing him in. I think last Friday I said the same thing. He had a really good start, but sub 10% on DK, sub 5% on FanDuel. You are paying up for him, but where he's like a quarter or half of the ownership of a Morton, I think it makes a lot of sense to maybe pivot a little bit if you are building multiple lineups. Logan Webb. Does show well in the model. I mean, this is another guy who generates a lot of ground balls. Don't really see the K per IP on the level of the overs or even the Mortons on this slate, but at the same time, generally a good job limiting damage. The issue with a guy like Webb, though, against a team like the Dodgers is you have a very kind of narrow margin for error. So if you have a pitcher who's going to strike out a ton of guys, you can. It's okay if he gives up a few runs. Like think of like an Andrew Heaney. Like if he has 12 Ks and he allows 4 earned runs, you're still probably exceeding value where he's generally priced. For someone like Webb, he's not going to get that many strikeouts. He is a much better pitcher than someone like Andrew Heaney. But at the same time, you're kind of threading a narrow needle, for lack of a better analogy. Dodgers lineup is really solid. Even though they're a bit banged up, I still think they're without Betts, a couple other guys. But yeah, some lefty power there. Obviously, Otani Freeman, dangerous. He's low enough, though, that I mix him in, but I don't know that he has the upside for me to really want to chase that again. I like Blanco as a pivot more. He is lower owned than Webb on both sites. And yes, he's a little bit volatile, but I'm always chasing K upside. Um, I was kind of surprised to see how high Slade Shoshone showed up on OF Index today. Not really an arm I'm getting to all that aggressively, trying some ownership. The Drew Thorpe ownership to me is a little bit shocking, though. And this is a talented young arm. He's looked good. Obviously, the Rockies are one of the worst offenses in baseball. They're on the road here. This is not a Coors game. So if you're looking for value, I think he's fine. I just don't know that we necessarily need all that much salary to pay up for bats today. We'll talk about stacks in a minute. But yeah, I mean, I think you could pretty easily fit Ober and Gilbert in most of your lineups, mixing some Blanco, Morton, and yeah, kind of mitigate that risk. Like you don't need to go to a chalky Drew Thorpe unless you really are trying to load up on bats. And for me personally, I don't know that that's something I'm looking to do all that aggressively. So yeah, compared to last Friday's slate where I think we were down 10, 15 pitchers in the rankings. Very narrow pitcher pool today, but that's mostly because I'm comfortable getting different with stacks. I also really just like the prices of the top arms, Ober, Gilbert, Blanco, more, and those four just affordable. Like, I don't know. I don't mind going to Thorpe, just knowing how good of a matchup that is. He has flashed some serious upside. But I don't know. At high ownership, I'm a little bit reserved in getting to him. A couple interesting arms kind of in this mid range here. I mean, Pavetta always has upside. Very wide range of outcomes, though. Tough matchup against the Padres. He's generally worse on the road. Don't know how much I want to get there. Colin Rea, he's a guy I used to stack against pretty aggressively. Not a ton of K upside, but he's done a good job kind of limiting damage. Don't think it's crazy to go there. Not really getting too much land in Knack just because Roberts does tend to keep a short leash on most of his pitchers. Kikuchi against the Yankees, wide range of outcomes there, but he is sub 9K. Definitely has upside. The Yankees offense has been pretty volatile. And I will say, I mean, Scherzer looked pretty good last time out. Didn't even get to 60 pitches, though. This is a terrible matchup for him here against Baltimore. At 9K, I just won't do it. Doesn't look like the field really is either, but for him to exceed value and be what you need in an optimal lineup on a massive slate like that, you're going to need him to throw more than 70 or 80 pitches, and I don't know that we're going to get that out of him here as he continues to work his way back from injury. But yeah, I mean, you can mix in guys like Montes, Stroman, Tyone, I don't feel great about any of them, if we're being honest. The Yankees game's interesting. Could be a high scoring game, could be low scoring. Both those pitchers are okay where they're priced, but tough matchups on both ends. So really not excited to get there. Like I said, I'm keeping my pitcher pool short for the most part. We did mention Sassoni and Thorpe, and again, pretty much anyone who pitches against the A's is going to look good in our data just because they do strike out so much. That park has been more favorable for pitchers as well. So yeah, I don't really like Slade, but if you're looking for a pun, he's going to be lower owned than Thorpe. Thorpe's definitely the better of the two, but like I said, just kind of live in the mid range and pay up at pitcher as much as you can today because for a 13 game slate, pitching really isn't as deep as we usually see. Um, let's see here. About to jump over his stacks. Um, so we got Chris. How's it going, man? Derek's in here. Hopefully, you get a few more viewers. Again, a little bit of technical difficulties on the front end. Still trying to iron out the details here in Evmux, but we'll get there. So yeah, everyone's favorite stack we'll talk about first. Sorting by OF index, I just refreshed. It looks like the Red Sox did climb over the Braves, which is notable. But at the same time, they're still going to be our top two here regardless. But let me refresh. I'll pull over the window here. Okay, so when we wrote up stacks, we actually had Atlanta as number one, Boston as number two. I think since lineups have come out, I know Chris published really early in the day today. It looks like that flip. But again, these are our two favorite stacks in terms of data, in terms of the model. So we don't have to get too weird with it. I'm going to pull up the probable lineups on my other screen. I'm just a little bit curious to see why Boston jolted up there. Only team with above a 50 OF index today. Good matchup here against Vasquez. But yeah, I mean, this is healthier than they've been. I mean, Tyler O'Neill was banged up for a while. Yoshida was in and out of the lineup. They're both in there today. Duran, Hamilton, Abreu, Devers. Yeah, just a really solid Red Sox lineup. So not surprised to see them flip the Braves, especially with how inconsistent Atlanta has been lately. Wind blowing in Atlanta slightly, not enough for me to necessarily knock them. It's an interesting spot here against Martin Perez for Atlanta. I know I'm kind of jumping between these two, but these are our two top stacks. Perez, historically, I don't know, not a great lefty. His splits aren't as severe as some lefties, though, so you could play guys like Olsen against him. Ozzy Albies actually has the best career numbers against him, and usually I don't look at anything like BVP, but they have a ton of at-bats against each other. Trying to think where Perez was playing that he was seeing him so frequently. But I just know Albies has good numbers there. But yeah, they're righties for the most part. No surprise. We have Darno listed in the stacks. It's actually going to be Murphy at catcher today, but they're pretty much the same bat, in my opinion. Murphy, the better overall bat. Darno kind of mashes lefties. I think that's why we projected him in earlier, but definitely fine going to either catcher there. And it's going to be Murphy today. And yeah, if you're looking to lower the price of the stack, we got Luke Williams batting ninth. He's min price on both sites. Is he good? No, he's terrible. But again, if you don't want to get weird with your pitching today, you want to pay up for Braves and some other big bats. I don't mind mixing him in a wraparound stack. But yeah, Ozuna, Riley, Murphy, all look great. Duvall's ice cold, but he's going to break out eventually. And I mean, Kalenic and Olsen towards the top of the order are lefties I'm fine with again. Perez's splits aren't as severe as some other southpaws that we see. Boston, already talked about how much I like this lineup. Um, Good spot here. Major park downgrade for these Padres pitchers this series. San Diego, one of the better parks for pitchers. Fenway, one of the better parks for hitters. And yeah, I mean, Vasquez, you look at his game logs, he's actually been half decent, but his last road start in Philadelphia allowed 6 earned runs. Go back to his road start before that. KC, he allowed 3. So while he's been pitching better lately, most of that's come at home, again, in a pitcher-friendly ballpark. So really don't need to worry too much other than looking at ownership about stacking up Boston. So I am curious to see where these guys are owned, those being our top two stacks. But yeah, we got Boston here at 3, Atlanta here at 5. I think the field's just kind of sick of Atlanta. They always look good in the data, never seem to perform. On FanDuel, Boston third, and then we have Atlanta down around the end of the top 10. So if you want to get different today, I think Atlanta's a good way to go. Have they been good? No, they've been terrible. Is Martin Perez terrible? I mean, he's bad, but there's worse arms on the slate. But again, at low ownership, when they're popping so well in the data, I think that's a team you definitely want to target in your high-risk contests. I'm very surprised that the Dodgers are so popular. I think this is mostly just because we're seeing Freeman and Otani as one-offs. But yeah, San Francisco, kind of a neutral park for hitters. Otani is obviously amazing, but he's almost 7K. It's not like this is Coors Field. There is some wind blowing out in San Francisco, but there is a park that's kind of designed to mitigate that. So I don't know. I'm kind of shocked that they're so popular. I'm probably just not going to play any Dodgers tonight, other than maybe a few Otani one-offs and lineups where I have the salary. We'll talk about Detroit in a little bit. That's a very cheap stack that I think you can do things like that. Pay up for a Judge and or Otani as one-offs and still load up on Detroit and feel pretty good about it with your arms. So the other one here is the Royals, and Tristan McKenzie's been terrible. He used to be one of these guys like Heaney where he'd allow a ton of runs but also get a ton of strikeouts. Now he's not getting the strikeouts, and he's still allowing a ton of runs. 4 earned last time out, 2 prior, 5 before that, 4 before that. He's been getting knocked around pretty much regardless of matchup. Royals' offense has been pretty solid this season. Again, there's some rain there. Roth is saying there's a chance this game gets cut off at some point, but I think it looks fine. And I think even if it does, you probably get 7 or 8 innings in, so it's not like you're going to lose out on all those points. And yeah, the Cleveland bullpen's half decent here, so you're really going to want to get most of those points against McKenzie anyway. So I'm not afraid to play KC here. I'm hoping maybe the weather drives that ownership down. Obviously, include Bobby Witt in those stacks if you are building Royal stacks. Hunter Renfroe went from batting 8th to now 5th in the order. He's a nice value piece here. Always has power upside. McKenzie does tend to allow the long ball. So yeah, if I'm eating chalk, I definitely prefer KC to the Dodgers. They're cheaper, and it's a better matchup. But yeah, I mean, looking at Boston, I think they're pretty much reasonably owned. If you're using the chalk arms, it's kind of tough to go with the Red Sox unless you're getting a little bit different with the rest of the batting order. But there's ways to do it. I think there's upside throughout that lineup. The guys that don't have power have speed. Rafaela at the end of the order has had multiple multi-home run games this season. Again, it's not something you could really bank on, but just knowing he has that type of upside, if he's lower owned than some of the other big bats, creating that wraparound is a decent way to get different if you're kind of chalky otherwise. We're seeing Houston show up as pretty popular. Jose Quintana, pretty inconsistent, coming off 2 of his better starts of the season. Houston definitely hits better at home, but at the same time, I mean, I'm fine getting to Houston here. I do think they're a little bit overowned. Toronto, interesting against Stroman. Yankees just haven't been good lately. Toronto does seem to be hitting the ball better. This is Stroman's former team. If you want to buy into revenge narratives, I guess that could work either way. Maybe he's kind of shook to be facing his old teammates, or maybe he's fired up and he's going to look great. But really, we're talking about professional sports. These narratives shouldn't matter all too much. But yeah, I mean, Toronto always has upside. George Springer, I think, hit 2 home runs the other night, almost hit a third. Yeah, he was crushing. Totally fine maybe using him as a one-off. He's still cheap, but yeah, the Blue Jays are okay here. Not crazy about it. But again, the Yankees have been struggling. Their bullpen's super banged up, so there is upside there, especially if they could chase Stroman early. On the other side, Yankees not as popular as maybe they usually are. I know Kikuchi's been pretty solid, but he's another one of these guys. I mean, he's got upside, but we're looking at his game logs over here on my other screen. I think 3 of his last 5 or 6 starts, he's allowed 5 earned runs. Yankees at low ownership, I do think they make sense here, sorting by OF index. They are showing up near the top, ranking 6th. But yeah, that brings me back around to Detroit here. So we have them actually as our 3rd stack, even with the updates throughout the day. We have them 4th. It's interesting. We talked about Slade as a potential pitcher, but now we're seeing Oakland as a pretty good stack in terms of upside. I would rather play Oakland than I would Slade Ciccone for the Diamondbacks. That's me personally. Andujar's been better than I ever thought he would be. Soderstrom, Langeliers, they actually got a decent lineup rolling out there today. Brent Rooker. I mean, yeah, kind of similar to Boston. Like the guys that don't have power have speed, so you're still getting upside for cheap. Fine getting to Oakland. No one's playing them. But the cheap stack we really like today is going to be the Detroit Tigers. Still no lineup out for them, but Zach Plesac's on the bump today for the Angels. Just not a quality arm. Kind of up and down from the minors. I think he was waived by Cleveland before the Angels picked him up. So, yeah, I don't know. And it's not like Detroit's lineup's all that great, but you're getting Colt Keith for cheap. He's up to 2nd in the order. Guy preseason, I know a lot of touts were high on. Yearling, Riley Green, hitting the ball well, Perez, Kana, etc. But yeah, I mean, just cheap. So if you want to pay up in pitching, get a low owned stack in there. You could get Gilbert over 5 Detroit Tigers and probably get to Otani and or Judge's one-offs, and whatever's left, you probably have some pretty solid bats with them as well. And that's a pretty different lineup on a 13-game slate. You're safe at pitching, which is usually the way I like to go, especially on slates like today where the pitching options just aren't all that great. But yeah, guys, definitely going to keep going through here some stacks. I'll talk about some one-offs, some lineups that are coming out. see how that's going to affect the data. But get your questions in. Let's talk about what contests you're playing, if you're maxing them or not, and what type of lineups you should be building for those specific contests. Again, there's a lot to like in terms of stacks today, not so much in terms of arms, in my opinion. It's a lot of like okay pitching that could do well, but the risky spots don't really have a ton of K upside. So, like I said, I'm keeping my pitcher pool short, really mixing up the stacks, getting to a lot of Detroit, Boston, Atlanta, Oakland now, something that I'm going to prioritize building when I do get off the stream. Not something I was really looking at all that heavily earlier. Baltimore scoring pretty well here. And this one's interesting, I think, worth bringing up just because they're facing Max Scherzer. Obviously, Scherzer, one of the more talented arms on the entire slate. He did pitch pretty well, I think, his last time out, but the issue with Scherzer, he's on a pitch count. So we're probably not going to get 70 to 80 pitches here. And again, I mean, he's had issues with lefty power even when he's on point. This Orioles lineup, guys like O'Hearn, obviously Gunnar Henderson, one of the best hitters in baseball right now, Santander, Kowser. Yeah, top to bottom, I mean, there's just upside here, especially for these lefties against Scherzer. So I don't mind getting to Baltimore. And the reason I really don't mind getting to Baltimore is that super low ownership. Seeing them at 9% on DK, 12% on FanDuel. Yes, they're facing Scherzer, but Scherzer's on a short leash. Definitely a nice day there in Baltimore, too. 83 degrees, nearly 50% humidity. Ball should be flying there if they can get under it. So is it a risky spot against one of the best arms in terms of talent on the board? Yes. But that risk is somewhat capped because Scherzer is on a pitch count. So yeah, definitely fine getting some Baltimore. Just trying to see if there's anything stands out that I don't necessarily agree with the data on. But really, I mean, all these stacks do seem to make sense. Like I said, if the Dodgers are going to be the most popular stack tonight, I'd get away from them. But I'm thinking a lot of that aggregate ownership is just on Ohtani directly. So let me open up a new tab here. We'll look at individual hitter ownerships. But yeah, guys, again, feel free to get any questions in. Like the video, subscribe to the channel. We will get these technical difficulties ironed out, but MLB season's long. We got a few months to go. Definitely in the middle of the grind right now, but MLB is one of these sports that is very much data driven in terms of projections. So as we get later into the season, the data gets sharper, the model gets sharper, and as players, hopefully we get sharper as well because the more data we have, the more we can kind of predict these outcomes. And with so many at bats, MLB definitely a sport a little bit easier to project in some ways than others, but also more volatility. So in DFS, you could take advantage of things like that. And that's what's going to land us on an Oakland or a Detroit, something like that. So, yeah, definitely fine getting to some of these cheaper stacks today in favor of paying up at pitching. I wish there were more cheap arms I could talk about. And yeah, some really interesting stuff today on these early games. I thought the Nationals called up one of their top prospects. It doesn't look like he's in the lineup, but I won't talk about those 6 o'clock games too much. All right. What else we got going on here? But yeah, guys, again, get your questions in. I'm going to wrap up in 5 minutes or so. I think we have a pretty good grasp of the slate today. There's not too much to parse through. Again, I'm eating chalk and pitching, getting different with bats. It's very, very easy to do. And for the sake of the stream, let's go ahead and build a quick lineup here. So I'm going Gilbert. Like I said, I really do like Ober. I'd be fine going up to Blanco or Morton. Really not going to touch Weber Scherzer. But yeah, let's go Ober. Again, this is the chalk pitcher pairing. And then if you go with a cheap stack, say a Detroit or a team that actually has their lineup out, would probably be better. That's annoying. Boston's kind of expensive. Okay, I'll go off a projected lineup for Detroit. But I'll show you guys kind of where I would be at. Again, I'd rather eat the chalky pitcher, get different with the bats. So Vierling's likely to lead off. We got Cole Keith probably batting second. So I'm just going in batting order right now. When it stacks alone, like you could play them 1 through 5 and not really worry about it too much. Conha, Perez. So yeah, this is 1 through 5. We're still left with 4,100 per bat with 3 spots left. So yeah, we'll pull off the Detroit tag. Say we jam Ohtani in there. We're still able to get probably half decent one-offs. So as is often the case, I'm punting catcher here. Really don't mind doing so. Just trying to think of which of these guys makes sense. It's kind of gross, not going to lie. Do love Murphy at his price, 3,100. So yeah, we're not really getting a full secondary stack, but you're getting your 5-man That's low owned with Otani, with Murphy, who has plenty of upside. And then, yeah, just for the sake of correlation, maybe I throw Luke Williams in there, even though he sucks, um, for Atlanta, just to kind of create that secondary stack. But yeah, I'd probably move things around. Maybe go with the shortstop for Detroit, who's probably McKinstry, and then maybe get a bit more of an expensive Brave to pair with Murphy. And again, you go Otani Judge, really solid build there. Um, but yeah, and I do want to show this too. I mean, even if you're going with like the Red Sox or the Braves, who are a bit more popular, um, or the Braves aren't that popular. The Red Sox are. So if you're going with the Red Sox, maybe go Blanco over Ober or over Gilbert. Um, but yeah, I'll go Blanco over, and then let's see what we do with the chalky Red Sox stack here because I do really like the spot for them, as does the model. And with the lineup out, um, we can actually just build off the lineup. I like Duran, Hamilton. I don't mind skipping Abreu um, because I kind of like that wraparound if we go with Rafaela. So yeah, I mean, if you're double paying up, the Red Sox are kind of pricey, but I do think there's enough value. Yeah, well, I mean, I'm going to go right back to Murphy as a one-off for Atlanta. I think in terms of catchers, if you're playing cash games or you're just looking for that one-off, 3,100 for him is definitely a nice price. You could also go Colton Wong, pull out one of these other more expensive Red Sox bats to get a little bit more balance. But yeah, for the sake of the video, I'll just go with Murphy. And then yeah, we got to go really cheap for first and second. But on these huge slates, you can do it. And yeah, I mean, it's tough now because yeah, Smith is dirt cheap for Boston. So if you don't want to put all your salary into the Red Sox, I mean, go with Smith and maybe pull whoever I pull is going to homer. Um, Probably Tyler O'Neill, just because they're no, I'm not pulling O'Neill. I'll pull Hamilton. He's probably going to swipe a bag or two, but I'm more comfortable getting away from that. Um, and then, yeah, looking at punts, I know we talked about Colt Keith. I don't mind him as a one off. And then at shortstop, maybe we get like a McKinstry or something like that. Um, but yeah, you get the picture. I mean, Arcia, there we go. We got two Braves, full Red Sox stack, two expensive arms, one's low owned. You can move things around to really get the better Red Sox stack, I think. Maybe go with Wong. And I don't know. I'm not crazy about Dom Smith, but he is too cheap probably for his upside. It is a favorable park for left-handed hitting. How's it going, Matt? Anything off OF model I was interested in outside of what we have up there? Okay, let me take a look. Yeah, so I think as far as stacks I'm interested in that aren't popping in the model, I think I'm reading that correctly. Outside of the top five. Yeah, I mean, KC and Cleveland are two that definitely stand out to me. I mean, it's kind of a cop out. They're 7 and 8, but they are technically outside of the top five. I just like that spot for both them, especially KC against McKenzie, but they're drawing significant ownership now. Um, who else we got here? I mean, Oakland, nobody's playing them. Baltimore, nobody's playing them. So, like, I actually do really like where the model's at today because it's kind of driving us into these questions. I know you're late. The Dodgers are the most popular stack on the slate, and we have them like at the bottom of low end index. So just use your Otani one offs where you could fit them. But other than that, I don't think you really need to play the Dodgers at all today. Um, but yeah, I mean, Baltimore, no one wants to play them because they see Scherzer, but Scherzer's going to get pulled after 70 pitches. Baltimore has a lot of lefty power. Yankees have upside against Kikuchi, very much boomer bust, not playing well. These are kind of borderline top five. Um, so let me see what else is standing out. And another way to kind of find that, I guess, would be to sort by team total. But usually that's where the field's kind of seeing things. Oh, the Diamondbacks are another one. JP Sears allows a lot of power. Diamondbacks have a lot of power. So if you want to go to Arizona as a little bit more of a contrarian option, data doesn't absolutely love them, but it respects them enough. 40.60 if index rated. Yeah, I'd be cutting off around that 40% today. And then only 30% aggregate on both sites. So Arizona, definitely one I'm looking at. But yeah, I mean, massive slate. So as long as you're not playing the chalk at everything, you should be in pretty good shape. Um, yeah, Matt, yeah, anytime, man. I definitely appreciate the questions. Definitely adds to the stream. Um, I think I'm about to wrap up. I got a little bit of building to do. But yeah, again, fun slate. I'll take one last look at the weather, see if Roth's made any updates over there. Not that he's been extremely on point, but I'd still rather go to him than try to figure things out myself. So Pitt Atlanta, some pop-ups, looks fine. Cleveland KC again, he thinks maybe the Storm's coming late and that game gets cut short. But that probably wouldn't be till like the seventh or eighth inning. So you're probably getting what you need out of bats there anyway. I have no interest in the arms in that one. But yeah. Again, Detroit, really cheap against Plesac. Good way to go. Oakland's made the biggest climb today. Slade for Arizona, an arm we have a little bit of interest in, but I'd rather play the bats there. And then the other just kind of chalk point to talk on is Drew Thorpe. Like, yeah, he's good. He's cheap. He's got upside coming off an awesome game. Went 6 innings, 5 Ks, no earned. And that was against Detroit. He's in arguably an even better matchup here. But again, this is a young arm. It's going to be volatile. Rockies lineup is not good, though, especially on the road. So fine using him, but I definitely think he's overowned. Just not sure I want to chase direct leverage trying to go to Colorado. Probably not necessary here today. All right. But yeah, I think that's it, everyone. Once again, thanks. Definitely appreciate you tuning in. Right at the half hour now. Slate locks in about 30 minutes from now. But yeah, check the links in the description below. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, and yeah, hop in the Discord, sign up. Definitely cheap to get access to the model you see here. We have lineup builder on the back end as well if you're a multi-lineup player. I hand build, but I still use the lineup builder just to see what the data is kind of projecting as the top lineups in terms of build, things like that. On a slate like today, that's super useful. It'll show you that you're probably better off going to the expensive arms, getting different with cheaper stacks. On other slates, that's not always the case. So just kind of seeing where builds are, I don't know, headed, for lack of a better word. But yeah, guys, fun slate tonight. Let's see some screenshots in Discord. I'll actually be back on the channel tonight at 9. Bride and Moose are at a wedding, so I'm going to help out with hosting the UFC stream. So definitely looking forward to that. But yeah, let's get those screenshots in tonight. Good luck, everyone. Take care and play ball.